Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's council meeting to hear submissions on local water done well. Following the hearing of submissions, a staff report will come to a future council meeting for us to make a decision. There will also be we'll be hearing a submission on draft development contributions policy and another one on the annual plan. Please remember to submit questions via the annual plan question tool and state which submission your question relates to. Staff can show you how to find this tool if you need some help. I believe Councillor Johansson is joining us on Zoom today, and I've got no other apologies or declarations of interest at the moment.
Councillor Johansson will be 10 minutes late.
Yeah, it'll be late. Okay, yep. I'd like to first welcome Marie and Helen, who are here on behalf of Horswell Hornby Riccarton Community Board to present their local Water Done Well presentation. Welcome.
Right. Start. If you feel free to start.
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to hear the submission of the Waipuna Horswell Hornby Riccarton Community Board on the proposed model for the delivery of water services. The board strongly supports Council's proposal for an in-house delivery model for water services. We understand that under this model, Council retains full control over water services and would continue to manage and deliver water supply, wastewater, and stormwater services directly through, although there would be changes made to meet new regulatory requirements. Both council-controlled organization models, the 3-water CCO and 2-water CCO, are opposed by the board and views that a model separating out stormwater would not work in a disaster. Now, Helen will provide more detail about concerns she would like to raise on behalf of the board, although the board understands the need for caution in relying on unconfirmed information or media reports only. I pass on to Helen.
Thank you. I just want to talk about the risks of going to a CCO. So, fully supportive of the board's position as it relates to council. You're doing the right thing. But I wanted to express some of the risks of CCOs. I had direct experience a long time ago as chair of finance in the earthquake years at being able, I have concerns where it was difficult to get changes from CCOs. Now, you've probably had your own experience this year on CCHL issues, but that's the sort of trouble we had at times with CCOs. Wellington Water, as you've probably all seen, has caused a lot of problems for their council. And there was a news article on the 3rd of Saturday, 29th of March, and I got something from Radio New Zealand on the 3rd of March, quite a long article, which I'm happy to, in fact, table. And if I can just go over what I think the issues are for Wellington CCO and the council. The CCO has contracted a limited range of contractors, and that has pushed up prices. They've got a graph which shows how Wellington compares to Christchurch, and Wellington is much higher. Weak financial systems, and they didn't even have a computer system that worked, and they were using a contractor's computer system. Lack of transparency, question marks about the consultant spend, and seem to have more expensive than other councils, and weak financial systems, which ended up in fraud. Now, that can happen in any organisation, but it does show that at the Wellington CCO wasn't being managed well. And recently in the paper, it states that the Wellington Council seemed unable to attain the resignation of the chairperson of the Wellington CCO. I find that extraordinary, but that's what's recorded. So the end result is the Commerce Commission is coming to manage and monitor the Wellington Water CCO. So I believe you're being much more prudent and careful in your response to keep the water services in council. And I do want to just add a note that if a CCO was established, it can set its own rating. So you're going to get a rating system that you haven't got control over. So that's all from me, and back to Marie.
So we thank you for the opportunity to speak to the board submission, and we look forward to continued collaboration to ensure that our community's needs are met in a sustainable and balanced manner. Thank you.
Good on you. Thank you. Question, Tim.
Yeah, thank you. When Three Waters raised its head, the Te Mata Arawai and the government used Scottish Water as the perfect example, although never gave any issues or problems with it. Why is it you think that Te Mata Arawai never mentioned Wellington Water as an example of what not to do?
Well, it's the one I've seen in the media. There could be others.
Yeah, but the government hasn't been laying that on perhaps as something not to do, so I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
No, I'm sorry. I can't answer that. Sorry.
Tyler?
Kia ora, Marie and Helen.
Thank you.
Helen, this is probably for you, but in your experience in governance, do you see any pros and cons with, one, the in-house model, and two, the CCOs, and what you think the governance differences would be between the two?
I'm sorry, I haven't picked up the question. I'm sorry.
So there in the submissions, there's been talks on differences between governance structures where we have full control over the water.
Yes.
But in terms of the delivery of that water program from back in your day to now, do you feel like we're doing our job? That's the first question.
Yes, I mean, I think in a way, from what I read in the media, you're actually doing a good job.
Yep.
Yes.
And
I mean, you weren't perhaps a couple of years ago or 3 years ago, but you certainly seem to have tightened up.
okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure when that line is. But,
No, that's good. It's a good answer.
Yeah.
The next one is around the CCO model. Do you see any benefits from going into that CCO model at all?
No. No. However, I did say to Mark coming in, I think you start with this model.
Yep.
And then in 3 years' time, if you look at what other councils are doing with a CCO model, there may be reasons to go at that time. But I would tend to think they're all going to be a bit flaky, actually.
Great. That's the governance answer I was trying to get. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good to go. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming in. Good to see you. Okay, so Ross and David up there somewhere, please. So you've got two things you're going to talk about. So you've got 20 minutes. First one's DCs, and second one's water.
Okay. Kia ora, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to you today. So I'm David Hawke, Treasurer of Hallsville Residents Association, and on my left is Ross McFarlane, who's one of our committee members. So in terms of our presentation, my role is to run a big picture ruler over our two submissions, and Ross is the one for some of the detailed questions. A sort of by the way, which is a sort of declaration of interest really, Ross is an elected member of the Hallsville River Rating District Liaison Committee, which I'm sure you're all deeply familiar with. So this committee is run by ECAN, and it's quite an important point really, because it has oversight over the Huratini Hallsville River from its source to Te Waihora, so very much a whole of catchment model, which we like very much. So we're going to talk first about local water done well. So as I've just said, what we're really looking for is a whole of catchment approach to outcomes. It's worth pointing out, as I'm sure you know, that all of our rivers have hydrological, ecological and cultural values, and we need those values to be respected. Obviously, they're important for the two rivers that have their headwaters in our part of the world, but it applies in general. So following on from this, our chosen option is the in-house model. We really like the option, how well it has worked in Hallsville by, for example, providing stormwater basins well ahead of when they're actually needed, rather than continually playing catch-up, which is what happens with a lot of other infrastructure. So outline development plans are really important there because they allow that sort of forward planning to occur. It's a wee bit of a step sideways, but you really need to point out the value of those outline development plans and that forward-looking approach with central government when you talk to them about the fast track and RMA reform. We're very conscious of the fast track proposal for 35 hectares or 500 homes in Western Hallsville, and we wonder what the planning is here from a local water done well perspective. And so outline development plan for that area, we wonder what that will look like, bearing in mind the legislation it's done under, and we would like to know, and I imagine you would too. So for this in-house option to actually work, the funding needs to be ring-fenced as proposed in your document and very carefully managed. We're absolutely emphatic that there's no cost sharing with Dunedin City Council. We really do not want that to happen. It's been canvassed through the media. If you read the Otago Daily Times, it's something that they are, it's come through in there. So it's a pretty careful newspaper. So it'd be worth getting a perspective as you discuss this reform on what the people over the other side of the river are talking about. Something that isn't in our submission but is really important to us is rainwater harvest, and we've long argued for rainwater harvest, and that goes back to Plan Change 60, which came through nearly 15 years ago now. And basically right across, what we see is our region takes its abundance of potable water for granted and misses the value of roof water, both as an asset that will save the city money and as less water runoff into the stormwater system. It's actually a very easy, low-cost retrofit, and we think that that needs to be included in your discussions. So to sum up, we like the way that the document has come through and given that high-level scoping, but our chosen option is the in-house model, but with a lot of care on the detail. So if we do a bit of a turn here, I'm not sure whether it's to the left or to the right, but we'll see, is the development contributions policy review. So something that we really, really appreciate is that we want to thank staff for their willingness to help us out with the detailed financial information for long-term projects as they affect Hallsville, and for which the development contributions collected in Hallsville have been applied. As I'm sure you're aware, there's quite a bit of detail in there, so that information just for Hallsville is 7 pages, 400 projects. And it's actually worth going through line by line, and we commend that to you. We also acknowledge the time given to us by a staff member back in 2022 who went through the development contributions system with our executive committee. As I'm sure Councillor Moore reminds you on regular occasions, Hallsville is the main growth area for Christchurch City. And we'll talk about other growth areas in a minute, because that's also really important when you think about development contributions. The issue we have, particularly in Hallsville, is that we're running behind in the provision of community infrastructure, community facilities rather. As the policy and its proposed changes stand, this will continue, possibly get worse, and we actually don't like that. It is interesting that we're one of the few residents group submitters, and we wonder if this is because most of the city is actually well established and they already have these community facilities. There are some puzzles in the development contribution system, and they actually contribute to the problem as we see it. So here's one: costs and development contributions don't always add up. So, project 67319, Quarry View Park, new play spaces. The spreadsheet says $14,500 is to be collected from DCs, 100% DC funded, but the community board approval is for $165,000. So there's a bit of a gap there. Here's another one. The project is 287 Cars Road Cycle and Pedestrian Overbridge over State Highway 76, the motorway. There's an underpass built by the Transport Agency just up the road, so there's actually no need for the bridge, but it's still in the LTP. And so far as we can see, there's no way for City Council to actually back out of these LTPs because development contributions have already been collected for them. The big issue, though, is money collected in Hallsville is being spent in parts of the city with little collection to Hallsville. So here's an example. Project 61772, Littleton Catholic Cemetery Extension Development. So Hallsville is contributing to that project, which we are a little bit puzzled by. There are other projects, if we have time, which I don't think we will, but the Matatiki Hornby Centre is one of those. So, for whatever reason, the long-term plan, and we have to think of the development contributions process in concert with the long-term plan process. The long-term plan is pretty light on Hallsville projects for whatever reason. So, given the City Council's financial situation, the result will be long-term scarring of Hallsville because of this deficit. We need you as councillors to work together to overcome that deficit. Other growth areas like Preston's are going to have such the same sort of area. So we support a more focused, not less focused, catchment system for development contributions. Something else is that our submission is focused on Hallsville, but what about the development contributions in intensifying parts of the city?
Just to let you know, you still have got another 10 minutes, so don't panic.
I was...
So, yeah, so that's the first 10 minutes. so don't try and rush yourself. You've got time up your sleeve.
Right, okay. That's very helpful because I was starting to get high blood pressure.
Yeah. And we don't need that.
Again.
Yeah, okay. So I think thanks, Mr. Mayor, that's really helpful. As I say, the more focused, not less focused catchment system for development contributions, and it's really important that they're spent in the area that they are collected. There are obvious exceptions to that in terms of things like Parakiore, those sort of metropolitan projects, but broadly speaking, they need to be spent in the area that they're gathered in. We understand that the mechanics of all of this is quite difficult, and we actually have struggled to understand the process. And we understand that there's going to be lots of unforeseen consequences, whatever you do. It's going to be complicated by change mandated from central government with the move to levies. And so that's an issue which, although in principle is outside the actual policy review itself, I'm sure you're bearing it in mind. So, as I said before, these development contributions are inextricably linked to the long-term plan process, and that in itself is critically dependent on the interface between a community board and its community. And what we would like you to do is to think about how you might enhance that interface as you proceed with the development contribution policy review process. I think that's probably enough for now. So thanks for listening.
Oh, thank you very much. Tim and then Mark.
Thank you, and I understand, like spending money that's raised in an area to be spent in an area, but what do you say when I have areas like Summerfield and Spraydon? In fact, most of the wards in my area are affected by people driving from, say, Hallsville to the central city. We've had another child hit recently. So what do you say about who should be paying for the upgrade of those intersections which school children are using, and drivers are driving faster and less, I guess, aware or concerned about those young people walking through? Is that going to be the parents paying for their children's safety?
I think, no, thank you for that. But just going back to our submission, we were focused primarily on community infrastructure, neighbourhood parks and sports parks. your point is really absolutely valid, and we don't object to those active travel road networks, sewer functions, those sort of infrastructures. So yeah, we're just in that things that affect our community in Horsell.
Yep, totally.
Okay, brilliant. Mark, then Yanni.
Thank you. Mine was very similar line of questioning, and the fact that the effect that the growth area has on the neighbouring major hubs, such as Hornby being next door to Horsell, that would come into your thinking as being valid to assist with that downstream effect as well?
Yeah.
That catchment focus is, not bigger, smaller, integrated with the LTP and just constantly watched and managed. The point that we got from the staff when we got these spreadsheets is that we asked for the spreadsheets of DCs linked to project numbers. Now that was very beneficial for us to be able to go through the LTP, get a project number, as we've mentioned, line that up, what are our thoughts on that, and then follow it all the way through. And I'm not sure whether you get that information in that format. It is a massive spreadsheet. You know, I'd love to be able to even design the spreadsheet, let alone have to work with it each day. But yeah, it's a really gnarly one when you start to break down by percentages and dollars. And going back to the scenario that David mentioned of the Catholic cemetery in Littleton, it's only 8 cents per housing unit equivalent. But it's just bringing all that together. How do you, what is a fair system? And as we've mentioned, it's not fair for the likes of Preston's or even Shirley Community Centre, you know. And we have a fair community-based approach to our submission.
Yeah, so the thing I would add to that is it's really important not to look at these catchment boundaries as like concrete walls.
Yeah. It's a whole city approach.
Thank you.
Always the quarter.
Yanni, please.
Yeah, thank you for the submission. You referred to a number of detailed projects, so it's not in the written submission unless there's additional information. Is it possible to get a list of the projects that you've identified with the shortcomings so we can address it through the LTP?
Well, certainly, and we could add to it to a degree, but you know, we don't want to get to that them and us scenario. It's just, how do you get a better system that focuses and services the growth in a system that is at the moment increasing DCs, but growth is relatively fallen, you could say.
I agree with you. Like in my area where I've got intensification, people struggle to see the projects that are going to offset the impact of that. But I think there's always been this chicken and egg situation. If we don't have something in the LTP, we can't collect DCs. If we've got it wrong in the LTP, as you're suggesting, around the DCs quantum, then the question then becomes, what do we do as we set the budget and as we set the DC policy? So it'll be interesting to see what the staff response is, particularly the ones that are under budgeted quite considerably. So the other question I had for you is, do you think there's a need for us to do more communication and engagement around how DCs are set and how projects are identified and scoped?
I could perhaps, because Ross is the person that knows the system in our context, we were oblivious to how the system worked. It was just a black box as far as we were concerned, and having someone sit down and work through that was enormously valuable. So, and where people with grey hair have got time to spend on this sort of thing, so the awareness of how this works, I would say even among some of our elected members, is not necessarily all that high. And I think that awareness really needs to be sharpened, because as has been really rammed home to us, if it's not in the long-term plan, then you're out of luck. And like your intensification question, well, how are you going to get people in your area, if they don't know that the system works in the way that it does, to actually use those development contributions for community infrastructure in your areas being intensified? Absolutely.
Thank you. That's very good. No more questions. You've still got some time, but if you're happy, I'm happy.
No, just reiterate the help that staff have been to us, and the fact that they knew DC review was coming up, and they started talking to us a long time ago, and the knowledge that most of the growth is in the area. So yeah,
it certainly is a big box with lots of tentacles in and out of it. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll skip to Diane. I see you up there coming a wee bit early, so you're at...
If you want a break, that's good.
No, you're right. Strike while the iron's hot.
Hello. Yeah, thank you for hearing me out yet again. We have chosen the in-house model because the City Council has done a good job with water. I mean, it's just that simple. And because we have members around Canterbury, there has been some concerns because there's been submitters in other areas that have had conflicts of interest. Now, this morning I've read through some of the written submissions there, and one of them, well, there was a couple, but one of them was talking about the 2CCO, and they implied that it had to be a 2CCO for there to be environmental health and resilience, the importance required precise attention to funding transparency. Like, the council can be funding transparent as well, but also then they put via user direct charges. And there was also another person who submitted, and they had lived in Auckland, and they didn't want a CCO model because they had that up there, and the water charges just kept coming up and up and up because it was a corporate, not a service model. So I think the City Council, to keep it in-house, is the best way to do it because you do know everything. I mean, people have said that over and over again in their submissions. And just living here I've lived here for 36 years, so been through a lot here. I've heard that when the earthquakes happened, this didn't happen in my area, but then there was some water mains bursts or some springs that came up and people were told to take clean buckets and just gather the water that way. Maybe they boiled it afterwards. They're smart. They probably did. But nobody got sick. Nobody died from our water. Our water is fine. People went and they got water from unregistered, untested springs. And they still do that today. And people are fine doing that. And they do that today because of the chlorine that was insisted on being put into our water. Unnecessarily. So... I don't know to me, the biggest problem with our water is central government. That they put in 3 waters, then the next government said they'd get rid of it, and they partially got rid of it. They gave the monetary responsibility to councils, but they didn't give you the full control, and still insisting on chlorination and fluoridation is in the pipeworks. So, and chlorine isn't just a taste thing, but it's something for people's health. Kidney problems, health problems. I mean, people with dermatitis problems, when they shower, it irritates the skin. So there's a lot of problems with the chlorine in the water. And as long as there's pressures in the pipe, yes, we want to get rid of the leaks in the pipes because we don't want to waste this precious resource. But as long as there's pressure, you're not going to get contamination coming in because the force is going out. But somehow central government insists on one size fit all and one size never fits all. So I guess my biggest hope, or our biggest hope, is that next time we elect a central government, there'll be a different mix and they will be giving more control back to the ratepayers. So why set up this whole bureaucracy that we won't need when there's a change in government that gives back more control to councils. So that's, yeah. So that's my hope, and short and sweet. There's a lot of, sorry, I missed that.
I don't think you'll both agree on.
So Jakey, you got a question?
No. I'll fill you later.
Because I can't, I have a hard time hearing. I have to get hearing aids, but my vanity, you know.
Getting along, Diane, that's all. We're just having fun here. That's all good.
Okay, that's fine. I have a thick skin. So
Thank you very much for Diane for coming in. That's very informative. Mark, you've got a question. Good.
Thank you for coming, Diane. I guess what I'm hearing is that you're happy with this look at the in-house model, primarily because we
Yeah, that's
can,
what the in-house model,
yeah,
yes.
and it's really because we can keep control and keep doing well what we're already doing. Is that right?
Well, that's right. Oh, and also thank you for the taps that we can get water without chlorine in it. So thank you, Phil, and everybody else here. Hope we can see more of those.
Yeah, one each one would be good.
There are still some unregistered, unregulated, untested springs that I have had to go to at times. But, you know, the more we have, the less we have to drive.
Yeah,
Fair comment.
very good.
So, thank you.
Thanks, Diane.
Andre, no, you've opened the
I have a question.
you've opened the taps now, Diane.
We might be waiting a bit for others to be here, so may as well. You touched on the way water is charged. So it can be done volumetrically, or it can just be everyone pays the same amount through their rates. Do you have a view on how water should be charged at this stage? Whether you think you use more, you pay more, all paying the same? Because if we keep in-house, they're going to be tough decisions we end up having to make, potentially, if the decision is with us. So just wondering if you have views on that at this stage.
Well, at this stage, I mean, we have it, you're allowed a certain amount before you're charged. And, I mean, that can be hard for people with large families. I don't have a stock answer because I'm representing a group and the group would have different answers on that one.
Yeah.
But,
It's something you may survey the group on over.
God, it's hard to get answers back from people.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay.
Now, because I'm so good, we're way ahead of time, and a number of people did up. So 2:30, have a long cup of tea. With Aaron, please. G'day, mate.
Really appreciate you having me along today. I just want to start with an anecdote. I was actually out picking organic blueberries on Sunday, and it was way out near, is it Whelan's Road, I think? So I was going in there, and I walked in, parked, and there's all these families there, a bunch of kids, people squealing with joy. I don't know if you've been out there, but the blueberries are insanely good. Came back with 9 kgs for about $65. That's insane. So anyway, so come back, and I noticed as I'm walking in there, there's all of this piping, little black piping, because the irrigation's off the charts. They've got to put cloches in. They've got to get this stuff growing beautifully without any insects and junk like that. Get our blueberries, come back out onto the main Whelan's Road, and I noticed running along the edge of the road is this beautiful little river-like thing. It's like in the culvert, and it's just this insanely clear water running down the culvert. And I'm going, well, that must be for agriculture, irrigation, or I said, taken it out of an aquifer somewhere, and it's just... But I was thinking, if we let this go out of our control, if a CCO gets hold of this, and that CCO is governed by central government, for example, and they have no idea what's going on the ground. They've no idea. They have no idea what's going on with the children. Like, there are these children squealing with joy. The thing is, as soon as you go with the CCO, they're going to say, well, stick a pipe in there. You've got no free-flowing water. Did you know one of the first cities in the world to ever get piped water was actually in Italy? Their cancer started going through the roof within 24 months because the water wasn't free-flowing. I don't know if you know anything about this. It's really fascinating. You put water under pressure, it comes dead. This water that was flowing down this pipe, or down the open culvert, was fresh, it was clear, it was moving, Local government central government doesn't understand that sort of thing. People who are on a board of directors who are unelected but are being talked to by some higher force don't understand this sort of thing. Where do the children come in? Where does the future... Like, if you're going to have central government dealing with this sort of stuff, first thing they're going to do is they're going to listen to the fluoride thing, for example. And next minute we've got fluoride in the water. And then you've got... Did you know, someone worked it out, it's actually cheaper to pay the fine in Christchurch than to actually put in the fluoride on every well and then get hazmat suits and get guys to store it and then get machinery to put it in. It's actually cheaper to pay the fine every month. That's insanity. And then you've got one of the biggest, most important federal government decisions on the west coast of the US saying, you stick that stuff in the water, you're dropping the IQ of children. And they have that as proven research fact. Well, if we're on central government control because of a CEO that's looking after our water, do your children have any control over making decisions about that? About the IQ of your children? If my children, well, luckily she's 21, she's kind of over that, We lived in Gisborne for 6 years. We lived in rural Gisborne, a little place called Mōrere, renowned for its hot springs, saltwater hot springs. She just lived off river water and oh my God, tank water off a roof. Never got the flu, never got sick, healed fast, perfect digestion, IQ of about 125, maybe 30. I mean, I don't know. That's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about my daughter. I'm thinking about how can she afford this in the future? Barely afford a house, And the first thing they're going to do is they're going to up the cost of our water. That's the first thing they'll do. They'll say, well, it costs so much, we're going to stick pipes and stuff like that. We're going to put the water up. And then my daughter and her children have to work out how to pay for that one day. That's what I'm thinking about. Mm-hmm. And so I thank you so much for your time.
No, you're right. Thank you for making the effort to come in. Any questions?
Yeah.
Timothy.
And don't forget, one of the wisdoms from Wellington was that a CCO can also borrow up to 500%. So, not like we're in enough trouble already.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing. I actually asked Grok yesterday. So what are the top 5 things you should do to reduce, the amount of outgoing so you can afford to look after the water yourself, Well, just get rid of 1 or 2 of the extraneous things like fireworks displays that cost blah, 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 and yada, yada, stuff like that. But in the end, how you reduce the cost is don't have people who have no awareness of what's going on the ground, shooting up our debts for stuff we can't control. Yeah.
Thank you, Aaron.
But
Brilliant.
passionate, but hey,
Good on you, mate.
thanks
Good
very
on
much.
you. Brody, please.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Brody tuku ingoa, ko Pākehā au, ko tangata tiriti au. My whānau have lived in Te Waipounamu since the middle of the 19th century, and large Irish Catholic family distributed over the island, and I think that we should keep this in-house. I think that keeping this in-house means that elected representatives have both more control over what happens with water, both in all senses, but also more accountability over what they do with water, which I think is important for how our local democracy works. I would request that council pushes for policy that does not do the bare minimum for engagement with mana whenua. I think that forward-thinking policy that doesn't do just what is required under the current central government legislation, but is looking to what Aotearoa may look like in the future is key here. Small waka used to be able to be taken from Kaiapoi to Te Waihora, and as we saw in the earthquakes, Ōtautahi is built on water. It quite literally came back up and became the swamp that probably some of my ancestors helped drain. Stormwater, blackwater, grey water, freshwater infrastructure and the way that is handled, designed, maintained has massive impacts on mahinga kai. Runoff, agricultural runoff, industrial runoff, civil runoff, and the way that affects our bodies of water needs to be it should be kept in-house, because that means that our elected representatives can be held accountable for how that is managed. An example of why a CCO is not a good option is the runoff from coal stacks at LPC, Littleton Port Company, and the environmental impacts that is having on mahinga kai sources in Whakaraupo, and the impacts that the land reclamation efforts being done by LPC is also having on that mahinga kai source. And how that is having a negative impact on relations between council and mana whenua. Mātauranga Māori and tikanga informed practice is the only way that we can move forward in Aotearoa to prevent further environmental harm, which I would classify as environmental devastation. The future of this country is one that is based in Mātaki Mai, constitutional reform that honours te tiriti the way that it must be honoured, and policy should recognise that and be doing all that it can to engage appropriately with hapu, iwi, runanga, in ways that recognise that mahinga kai and other things that our freshwater, blackwater, stormwater infrastructure has our taonga that are recognised under te tiriti, and our policy, sure, this might be a temporary, maybe under a different central government, we will see different legislative changes that council will have to react to, but you have an opportunity here in this policy to ensure that this is forward thinking about how we engage with the sphere of rangatiratanga influence. Thank you. I'll take questions if anyone's got them.
Kia ora, well, thank you so much for coming in. You're a bit of an anomaly. Not many of you come in talking about mātauranga Māori practices.
Right.
I just wanted to ask a question around how you envision that to be structured in the way that we engage with Māori at the moment is ask them if it's all good. They go, yep, all good. And then it pretty much gets implemented. How do you see that working forward if we were going to utilise mātauranga Māori practices for water reform and actually looking after our environment?
Well, I mean, quite often that engagement is done in a way, right, where council or a CCO comes up with an idea, does lots of consultation, puts something almost into practice, and then presents it and goes, hey, y'all all right with this? Māori worldview should be brought in at the start of changes to infrastructure and planning. I don't want to talk about getting into structures in terms of whether it should be 50-50 co-governance and the wording that's been used around that, but there is a relationship that has not been maintained that must be maintained, and it is up to our elected representatives to actually work on that.
Great answer. Kia ora.
Sweet. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
About a couple of things, so
Wow.
take your time.
Kia ora koutou. Thanks for having us. We're from the Estuary Trust, and I'd like to introduce Leslie Bolton-Ritchie, who is, you may know, is a coastal water quality and ecology scientist. And Leslie's our new treasurer, so she's part of the executive of the Estuary Trust. And Leslie's going to talk about Water Done Well, our submission about that this afternoon.
Thank you very much for having us. I'm going to read my notes rather than ad-lib because I can get repetitive and a bit passionate, and so I'll just read my notes. So I am representing the estuary as a trust member, and it's all about the estuary, nothing else. Our position on the delivery model is that we strongly support the option of an in-house water services delivery model. And our interest is in the stormwater and wastewater aspects of this model because that relates to the estuary. Untreated and treated wastewater and stormwater flow directly or indirectly into this estuary. The ecological stresses that are added included nutrients, which is mainly from the wastewater. Then we have sediments and contaminants. Then this estuary, we have a lot of other stresses. We have disturbance, we have altered estuary edges, we have continual small reclamations. All of these combined, we have got cumulative effects in this estuary. And then you add impacts of climate change and the stresses that will bring with rising sea level, increased water temperature and air temperature, and man, you've got a major mix of things that can totally go wrong for the ecological health of this estuary. The Trust acknowledges the significant progress the Council has made in the treatment of stormwater in new subdivisions through the construction of stormwater retention basins and swales, and the plans for stormwater retention basins along the Green Spine. Well done. We also acknowledge the removal of the discharge of the treated Christchurch wastewater from this estuary as of about March 2010. But we also acknowledge the hard work and advocacy of dedicated past members of the Trust, Estuary Association and the community, which resulted in the Christchurch City Council no longer being able to discharge treated wastewater into the estuary, and hence the construction of the wastewater pipe. That is the current delivery model that has provisions for communities, including groups such as this Trust, to influence decisions is ideal as it integrates outcomes for the natural environment in conjunction with outcomes from the water delivery service and the community. We do note, in terms of wastewater, that the tow drains around the treatment ponds are still an issue for the estuary, as they're the most likely source of the elevated ammoniacal nitrogen concentrations at Sandy Point in the estuary. And concentrations of ammoniacal nitrogen at the site are often above concentrations that are toxic to aquatic life. So there's still some influence of the wastewater, in this case it's the wastewater treatment system, on the estuary. Stormwater. There are numerous discharges of stormwater into the estuary through pipes and through Linwood Canal and drains such as Charlesworth Drain. The stormwater discharge is typically not treated, so there's no swales, retention basins or catch pits, and hence the stormwater is a source of litter and contaminants such as zinc, hydrocarbons and sediment from road runoff, sediment from erosion and poor sediment controls during land development. You know, we have the Port Hills right beside the estuary. The Trust sees there is a need to improve the quality of the stormwater flowing directly into the estuary to improve ecological health. We consider the Trust is more likely to have some influence over the decision makers re any improvement in the quality of stormwater flowing into the estuary through the current working arrangement with council staff than through a council-controlled organisation that is primarily focused on service delivery, and from my experience is likely run by engineers who think differently to ecologists. And I'm speaking from experience here. And this is a bit of a negative. Needless to say, we consider the existing Ihutai estuary and coastal stormwater management plan to be inadequate in terms of future improvement of the quality of the stormwater flowing into the estuary. So in summary, the estuary needs technical water infrastructure experts, ecologists, mana whenua and community groups to work together as per an in-house water services delivery model to provide the best ecological outcomes within the bounds of monetary constraints and community needs. Thank you.
Thank you. That's good. Celeste, please. And then Yanni.
So it might be more of a question. Are we able to ask for an update on the Bexley Drain through this process? Can we get an update on the Bexley Drain, which was highlighted in this? Because I think that's coming back.
We can take a note of it.
Kit's going to talk to the drain.
Okay. I'll come back to that then.
Yanni, please.
Thank you for the submission. There's a lot of information there that I don't see in front of us. Is there a separate written copy of what you've just talked to us that's been submitted, or are you able to submit what you've just said? So
I can
there's a lot
submit.
of technical detail.
Yes.
Yeah, stuff in there.
We made our submission and then I was not involved in that, and I've sort of come on a bit later to kind of flesh out how it really relates to the estuary, because that's what we're about, how it relates to the estuary.
Cool. And so basically Kit's going to talk to the annual plan submission next.
Yep.
But I was really keen not to lose track of the wastewater treatment plant stuff. So probably I guess we wait to get the further information and then we can put through our...
Well, that's right. I would just like to add a few comments after Leslie's, based on me writing our submission, which is the thrust of which is we prefer the in-house option because of the great relationship that we've had with council over the decades, both in support for our community trust from City Council, but also the way we can talk to staff. We have a memorandum of understanding, so we have a dedicated staff member at our monthly board meetings. We have a memorandum of understanding document which allows us to budget on a 10-year basis in a tripartite manner with Environment Canterbury. And all of these things allow us to really use the often integrated policies and directions and plans of council and for water and wastewater, in particular stormwater, with other planning that's going on around the estuary. So I think it's been a great success, and that's why we prefer to stick with the status quo at the moment for the in-house option for water delivery.
Okay. Good.
And we will submit Leslie's document to Jessica after this meeting.
Cal.
Thank you, Leslie. That's really interesting. In terms of the drains that are draining into the estuary, has there been any progress over the last few years on improving the water quality that's coming in to the estuary on those drains? Because it's been identified as a problem for some time. What level of engagement have you had with council over that?
I can't really answer that question. I believe there's been a little bit of work. I know the Bexley drain that Kit's going to talk about has done some work. I'm not sure about the other ones, like in terms of the water quality in Limwood Canal and Charlesworth.
Yeah, because it
I
would
think
seem
there might have been snippets of work that's done. I don't think Environment Canterbury have done any work, so any work would have been done by the council.
so. Yeah, it seems to me to be a fairly simple thing to fix, ameliorate. Kit, is there anything that you?
Well, I think we should probably switch over to the annual plan bit now, and I'll continue answering your question around that. So with the I'm sort of switching times here, but bridging the two areas. So we've got an investigation with the Bexley drain. Now, you probably you may or may not be aware of the identification of the leachate that comes out of the Bexley former landfill, and that is highly toxic, and it's completely untreated and flows straight into the estuary at nearly the mouth of the Otakaro Avon River. So we've been working with council about a plan to tackle that pollution, and I think that kind of plan needs to be transferred to all of the drains that come in. We think that the Bexley drain, with its highly toxic lead levels and other really toxic material leaching out of that landfill, is probably the best to tackle first. But Kelly, coming back to your question, I think it would be great if we could maybe have an option of, once we've tackled that worst case scenario, to actually look at the other drains, because I think there'll be an easier fix, and it'll be about just stopping the direct. We'll have a sort of a catch pit, and the engineers will be able to sort out some sort of way of tackling the contaminants that could flow through a dedicated end of the drain before it hits the estuary or the rivers. So that would be my suggestion there. And coming back to the estuary drain itself, we really applaud the council's work on this so far. I don't know whether you've had a chance to read our submission, but the Patterson-Dallimore partners have come up with estuary drain identification evaluation of possible remedial options. And we've seen that report, and we've had some feedback from both our most experienced board members, Leslie to my right, and also Vicky Southworth. And they have fed back to the board about looking at the report from PDP, the engineers looking into the options, and the annual plan submission from the trust sort of says we'd really like to work closely with those options because we don't think it's quite right at the moment. We think that the contamination, at the moment we really need to focus on the water quality coming out of that option, and we think that there's sort of, how some of these engineering schemes have gradients and ratios, and there's numbers put on things, and we think the numbers are not quite right at the moment. So we'd love, and in the submission I've said we'd love to be part of working with the firm to help choose some of the options around the design of the Bexley drain, which I think would be the worst and the most important to hit.
I'd just like to say something. The focus of that report seems to be on the aesthetics and improving the aesthetics, not improving the outcomes for what could happen in the estuary. So we see the focus as not meeting the estuary needs.
Yep, good point. Celeste? Oh, sorry. Yeah, Daniel's Cal. Sorry, Celeste. Yep.
I think, sorry, going back to the question before, do you know what the time frame is to get options? Because it says you're looking to accelerate the work, but I'm not actually don't know where that's at. So I wonder if that's something I need to put through the annual plan tool. Is that a question for that? Yeah, okay. So we'll try to get some information on that. You probably know more than me, you do know more than me, but I'm not quite clear on where it's at. So
No, we usually rely on the great knowledge of Eric Banks for that kind of information because he knows where the planning is at. So we'd be asking Eric. So
okay.
Please ask him about that. I've supplied Eric with our feedback from Leslie and Vicky yesterday, and because in the last board meeting last week he said there's still time to feed back to the options engineers about that. So please feel free to go through Eric on that.
Okay, and those other bits of work there that you're talking about in terms of habitat sort of support, have you had any feedback about support funding for that? Because we have the Environmental Partnership Fund, which might be an option. So
that would be great to add to if we can separate some of that out and use that as an option as well.
We can probably provide you with some information on that,
yeah.
Which don't know where that comes from, but we'll figure that out. Thank you.
Thanks, Celeste.
And sorry, Cal again.
Yeah, again, I'll get to a question in a second. Thank you so much for the work that you do on behalf of the city to advocate for the health of the estuary. I guess my question is, if you were to do a scorecard of our estuary out of 10, where would it be on a scale of 1 being poor, 10 being excellent, given, of course, the fact that it is surrounded by urban development on all sides? Would you put a figure on that, Leslie?
It sort of depends where you're coming from, because I think with the outfall construction, you're thinking about the highly nutrient-rich waters of the oxidation ponds coming into the thing. That's vastly improved. So you have to put that aside. That's probably an 8 out of 10. And we've got work to do with the inputs that are coming from other areas like sediment things. But then you sort of think about bird disturbance and all those wonderful 122 species of birds we have in the estuary, which at the moment are highly impacted by humans and their companion animals. And we're working with council and the dog bylaws at the moment to try and get either sections of the estuary edge dog-free or definitely on a shortish lead. So that area is a bit low. That's about 5 out of 10 at the moment. So we have those kinds of things. Anything you want to add, Leslie?
In terms of ecological health, I would say maybe 4 or 5 out of 10. I'm basing it, having read some of those early Knox pieces of work about cockles. Like the cockle numbers are way, way less than they were like in the 60s and 70s. So, it is declining. And there are so many things happening in the estuary that, and you go down Humphreys Drive, it smells like rotten eggs because all the macroalgae that's growing there, and that be impacting all the life underneath and the sediments and making it anoxic. So, it's got potential to kind of tip, I reckon, but, with all the cumulative effects. But definitely saying that, if you go to the South Shore side of it, it's better ecologically than the western side.
I wonder if you could put together over time, just a suggestion, a series of scorecards for a number of things like this, and when you come back to us, just sort of let us know where things are at so that we can sort of see the trends. I mean, as observed by the Estuary Trust, the closest people to the data and closest people to the situation. I think that'd be really useful for all councillors to actually understand in a very simple way, and believe me, they need simple. I am speaking for myself.
Professor
Dr. Coker. I just think that would really help us. Yeah.
Well, there used to be annual water quality reports from ECAN because they do monitoring, and every year they do an annual summary report on, and based on the nutrients in that, they'd give it a good, poor or very poor kind of score. And then there's the City Council monitoring of the sediments in the biota, and if you go to Lawa, you see the score of those sites on Lawa.
I think we'd like to hear it from you, Leslie, from the Estuary Trust.
Well, I could put that together, but it pulls all together ECAN and the City Council data.
Okay, just before I get Yanni to do his one, that estuary drain must be tidal, is it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, Yeah, okay, because you're talking to the person that 50 years ago dug it.
Yeah.
No.
It's all
It
your
was,
fault.
it was already there. It was a Christchurch Drainage Board job that instead of being a little piddly wee ditch, we opened it up so it's like that. But it's probably all sagged in by now because that's a long time ago. So you're right, it definitely does go through the landfill that's there. And I'd say the bottom metre of it from memory is in virgin ground. So you've got stuff oozing out the side. Is that what you're saying? You've obviously tested and it's not happy stuff.
No, it's still terribly polluted.
And also the near the low end there's been erosion, so you can see some of the stuff that's on the landfill kind of poking through the banks of the.
I know, I covered it up.
Well, it might have become uncovered since then.
No, yeah, we dug it all the way up to the back of that, right at the top end. Yeah. Okay. Yanni, lastly, please.
And thanks for the work that you're doing. We have asked that the water people from council actually go to the community boards and present on their water quality data monitoring. So, I think that's a good step as well. I was just interested in your comments around the integrated stormwater management plan for the area not being inadequate. So I was just wondering, again, if we could get some details around what are the things that you think, the top 3 things we could do that we're not currently doing in that plan.
We did provide feedback when it was up for public submission a year or two ago.
Yeah, and generally the response has been, we don't have the budget, so we're not doing it. But now we're in the budget process, we can move budget amendments. So that's why, again, just maybe getting that reinforced to us would be useful. Thanks.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much, both of you, for coming in.
Thanks, Council.
And thank you so much for the work you do. It's very much appreciated.
And as a partner, thanks very much. We appreciate your work too.
No worries. Pam is online. Hello.
Hello there.
Hello.
What a busy old time. You've kept us consulting with the City Council. I think we might have done 4 or 5, maybe 6.
Yep.
Submissions with council in the last few weeks, so it's very the pressure is on. Let's hope we have a rest sometime. Anyway, my submission is very short. It's just a very short one-pager. It was preferring option 1, and then I just give a few comments there below why I thought it was important. The council has done very well picking up a very rundown system and bringing it up to what we've got today. I particularly think of the small water supplies like the Pigeon Bay water supply, and I have on several times in the last year had to working with the water team with water leaks, letting the community know that there were restrictions on the water supply. I have the group email, so we welcome the opportunity of working together with the council. So it's a very good close relationship that we have. And any other conglomerate, whatever is decided upon, or the lates, or whatever you might call them, would we get the same personal touch as what we're getting now from the council? That's what it's all about. And just to say that we've got 4 or 5 runanga on Banks Peninsula, and we work very closely with them. It'd be sad to lose that relationship. It couldn't. I don't know whether it would be clearly outlined in the new company, but we appreciate what happens now. And I just remind you that do keep using the Akara Harbour Small Settlement Study. It was a huge study. Council was recognised for that work many years ago, and it should provide guidance for the council. So there we are. Any questions? It's just short and sweet. I thought I had to put something in.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And so you can, so you should. No, we've all questioned out today, so thank you very much for making the trouble to come online and come and have a yarn to us.
Okay. All right. Well, we welcome the opportunity of continuing to work with council on many opportunities, and that I think that all the waters should remain together. It's all the one water source that we should be using, and we should be learning about it together with our local runanga. Thank you.
Yep, thank you very much. Good on you. See ya. Lindsay.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and councillors. Don't usually put submissions in, but this one being had a career in infrastructure, I felt I was obliged to. Water done well requires council as the owner I emphasise, to implement a business model to provide perpetual economic, efficient, resilient and sustainable water infrastructure. And those words are important. Water infrastructure has been a total local government responsibility since 1989. As chair of the National Infrastructure Advisory Board about a decade ago, as we were providing a 30-year plan for infrastructure for the national government at the time, water infrastructure was red flagged throughout the country. This came from annual auditing by the Audit Office, showing that there was a general depreciation of standards in water infrastructure around the country. They were continuously seeking support from government for funding, and that was mainly because the RMA was causing real costs for complying with environment. And the Havelock North situation pushed it over the edge with a health scare. Local water done well prompts council to seriously address their responsibilities for water infrastructure. I support the initiative, and for too long water services has not had a priority in government, and I've seen that as both as a designer, as a local government executive in Southland, and also as a contractor. The issue of stormwater and as part of Three Waters, I think your last discussion emphasised it, is so much integrated with your community, and therefore I advocate that it should remain as part of a council function, because it's not defined. It's far too complex to separate out as an identifiable asset, and there needs to be strategic priorities. I have warned this council before when I was invited to a discussion that there are some huge challenges coming towards you in terms of stormwater, and principally around its discharge into the environment. Runoff from roads, contamination, water quality, flooding and drainage are all big issues which are in the future, and therefore are going to have to be addressed. So I advocate the Two Waters concept for the proposal of what might be in-house or Two Waters. I found the consultation document underwhelming, does not give a justifiable argument for the in-house model. There was no adequate explanation or justification supporting the current in-house model, or explanation of any initiatives to improve the capability or efficiencies in the future. The current operation deserves to have its business adequacy highlighted. Planning, funding, performance, systems, regulatory conformance, people resources, for justification to be the preferred option. There is no rational performance measurability outlined other than scope and volumes. Funding seems to imply that comfort with general and non-transparent rating is favoured. No mention of growth and demand funding from development contributions. If the current management and operations establishment is achieving water done well, or can be modified to achieve it, why not be transparent and skite about it? To aspire to water done well expectations, the best approach is to put Two Waters into a CCO. Two Waters is a $500 million a year business. That's come from your draft annual plan budgets. Line infrastructure from source to service for healthy water. Line infrastructure from source to environment for wastewater. Identifiable customers favours user pay models, with transparency for both service and community values for health and environment. Two Waters CCO provide leadership through governance, management, capable operations, technical expertise, financial sustainability with clear responsibility, performance expectations, measurable accountability and transparency. The Council owns Enable, Orion, Airport, International Airport and Port Littleton. I ask the question, are all these well done? Are they well led, managed and operated? Is the community and customers satisfied? To I answer that yes, yes, yes and maybe. Important point. Infrastructure requires people and systems to make them function well. A CCO with its own identity, responsibilities, leadership will be attractive to a sustainable team of people and advanced systems. I had experience of this when I was in Southland. We had the Transit Act come through. We had a very large roading operation. We were forced to create a local authority and trading enterprise, which is the forerunner for CCOs. We were the first in the country to do it. A lot of people come and copied us. That late became South Roads. The council kept it for 4.5 years. It was a straight contracting operation. This is not a contracting operation. CCO is not a contracting operation. But that is still operating today, 30 years later, as a viable business within the South Roads company. It shows you what the same people can basically do. So in summary, local water done well is an aspiration. Two Waters is a mature infrastructure which demands leadership, systems, capability, transparent value for money, and to be resilient, sustainable long term. A CCO with good leadership and structure and resourced with capable people is the best model for Christchurch City with a population of nearly 400,000. A CCO is not contracting out. It is a business model focused on best infrastructure for community needs. Thank you for the opportunity to present today.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. You've used up all your time. There's 2 questions. Are you... Yeah, serious one. Lara?
Thanks so much, Lindsay. Just wondering on your perception of how good either a council or a CCO is, depending on the instructions they're given. So, for example, councils didn't get directed with standards and those kind of things that they had to meet with their water infrastructure by central government, and that's one of the reasons they didn't do it. Is there potential just for, and like councils are doing better now, for the instructions to be clearer from central government, the standards that have to be met, just like you would do with a CCO?
Yes, what I said is from your consultation documents, I couldn't judge how good it is now. I've got some impressions because I was a judge for Canterbury Contractors competitions for 6 years, so I saw a lot of projects being done. I'm also involved with a couple of contractors at present, and I get feedback from that. So I've got no real opinion of how well it's done. How good are their asset management plans, their strategic planning, their financial accountability, their performance in terms of delivering plans, responses and all that. There's no measurability, nothing to explain to us as to how good they are now. And that's why I think you've actually, this report's actually done a disservice to those people for not explaining that. Now, you may have better information, more information to make your decision. Yeah. But also, I would have expected that, there is opportunity for looking forward. And that's where I tend to look. I always look forward, having come from my business background. You're always saying, what can we do and how do we be better all the time? Because
that's right.
It's been a commercial world where I've come from. But this is not necessarily a commercial world. It is delivering the best service. So how good are the systems that they work to in terms of a lot of their technical systems as well as operational systems and whatever. So the opportunity is there to do that. But what you do need to do, and I think this is very clear, and this is where we found out under the roading system, was when you separated out the asset ownership and management from the doing and the delivery and the expectations of that, it had a clear barrier. And you'll see in my submission that I do say that good responsibilities allocated to various bodies with some tension is good. Yeah. And so if you can do that with your in-house model, maybe. But I advocate going to a full commercial model because it allows you to put, the other part it does, it allows you to separate your water charges from rating and gives the public transparency of what's the real cost of delivering that, turn the tap on in the morning, flush the toilet.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, I think that's a very important part that and one of the failings that has happened that we found in the National Infrastructure Advisory Board was councils, when they got this shock of we need this amount of money for doing this, and it suddenly come on them, we need this, upgrade this sewage plant or do this water treatment plant or something like that. It affected their cash flow, so they had to worry about rates. They didn't have the borrowing headroom and all the rest of it to get over it. Here, what we're doing here with a CCO with its own borrowing and all the rest of it, it can do that.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much for coming in. Good to see you. Nathan, please.
Kia ora.
Morning. Afternoon.
us cracking?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go if you like.
All right. Kia ora koutou. Nathan Pulaski, tōku ingoa. My presentation will be brief, but happy to take questions. The reasons that I'm supporting option 1 for water to be kept in-house are mainly the following. So firstly, I'm concerned about accountability. Maintaining in-house control means there is a closer link between operations of anything, in this case water, and the people who are accountable for the management of the thing, in this case water. So that's the first thing. The second thing is expertise. So moving management of these systems outside of council will result in a loss of institutional knowledge and expertise. Thirdly, I'm concerned about slide. So other options are the first step in my way of thinking to privatisation, charging for access to a fundamental human right, which is clean drinking water, and sewerage and stormwater are kind of correlated to that, but clean drinking water in particular, and the loss of accountability. In terms of some examples, some comparisons, or a comparison that I might use was the outsourcing of roading and footpaths. And I know there was a dual operation in that regard, but as a result of that, council's financial statements would indicate that, taking account of inflation, it's become a lot more expensive to manage roads and footpaths now since that contracting out has occurred. And it's not necessarily resulted in effective decision making or long-lasting repairs, in my experience, certainly not where I live, where the same holes had to be repaired 4 times just in the last few years. And in terms of maintaining council control and keeping it in-house, one of the reasons that I like that is because there's personal responsibility. And I had a situation when water charging was brought in Christchurch City Council. I have a family of 8 living in my house. There's no way we were ever going to be able to be under the threshold. And so we'd have to start paying for our water. I contacted my local city councillor, Mike Davidson, at that point. And he followed that up, and the council came out. They changed flushing systems on my toilets, my showers, put a regulator on the water inflow into my house, and consequently we didn't get charged because we were using far too much water. And I wasn't charged for that. I wouldn't get that level of, I don't believe, that kind of response if the system was no longer in-house. Ultimately, what I'd like to see for Christchurch is to get chlorine out of my water. I remember good tasting water, and it tastes rubbish now. If option 2 or 3 can deliver that, I'd like to see the evidence to support that. But at the moment, unless we've got a better solution to deal with that, then I would rather at least have water being dealt with in-house so that there's a responsibility, accountability, and the knowledge that we currently have in the system being applied. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Nathan? No. If just about everyone, a vast majority of people have been on a similar vein to you coming in, so we've asked a lot already. So thank you very much for making the time.
That's gold. Thank you.
Okay, so it's Steve, please. G'day, bud.
Good afternoon. Look, in my submission, I advocated for a 3-water company owned by the council and was thinking of the water care model in Auckland, which I've experienced. Now, what I've since found is that is actually a 2-water model, and the council retains responsibility for the stormwater management. And so if I could change my submission to, I'm now advocating for a 2-water company. The hybrid model, I think, is what you've described it as. The main thing I want to advocate for is charging directly for water so that people appreciate the finite availability, cost of supplying and treating the water they use and dispose of, not having that cost included in the rates, making the actual cost less clear. On my cross-lease property in Auckland in the mid-90s, there was one connection to the water care supply and then a sub-meter to each cross-lease property, with the sub-meters being used to allocate the water care main meter cost. Potable water was charged according to the meter reading. Wastewater is a percentage, I think 75 to 80% of that charge, and there was a daily charge for wastewater. The system worked well and made users aware of the cost of water supply and disposal. My understanding is that the average water use per person in New Zealand is around 250 litres per person per day, which means the current system used by CCC for water charging has a large element of cross-subsidy incorporated. This practice hides the true cost of water supply and disposal and encourages waste and doesn't make the user pay. Water company would correct this by adopting the water care model and allow rates to decrease. My concern with the in-house model is that charging for water won't occur or will be delayed as too expensive or too hard as happened to date, and will also have the lower borrowing limit. So I'm advocating for charging for water. You pay for what you use, and there is a company there that has some objectives set as to the delivery. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Melanie, please.
One of the concerns that's been brought up about having a CCO is additional costs, like the cost of having a board and things like that. What do you think about, what's your opinion on that?
Look, I don't know the details. What I know is that the system worked well in Auckland. And I guess there are levels of management within the council operation, and presumably some of those will still exist in a new organisation. But there is going to be a head of that, and there is going to be a board that is managing it, which I'm assuming would incorporate some councillors.
Good. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, at Christchurch, we've got a number of examples of CCOs that work very well. Our CCHL family, for instance.
Yeah.
You've mentioned Auckland Water, but Wellington Water is the opposite. It's a total problem and sham. When things fall apart, irrelevant of the CCO or whatever, the ratepayers and the city council has to pick it up. What are your thoughts? What's the difference, or what are your thoughts with the Wellington Water example versus Auckland or someone else?
And look, I don't know enough about the Wellington Water situation. I know that the Auckland system, to me, as a ratepayer, worked well. And my understanding is that the Wellington Water system is some less well-defined relationship, which was saying it wanted to do water, but but the councils were responsible for then funding it, and that may be where the underfunding has occurred. I mean, I look at the costs associated with that, and a lot of that will be maybe due to systems, but may also be due to the emergency nature of all the way they're managing the process.
Yeah. Thank you.
Brilliant. Spot on. Look at that. 1 second to go. Well done. Thank you very much for coming in. Good on you.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Kevin, please.
Good afternoon, Mr Mayor and councillors. I have had 35 years in local governance and administration, as well as prior to that 2.5 years as an elected member, so I jumped the fence. My submission supports the two-water CCO option. The New Zealand Infrastructure Commission showed in a report last year that New Zealanders are amongst the highest users per capita of water in the world. Volumetric charges in the city have proved a saving of 10%. 72% of users support volumetric changes, according to New Zealand Infrastructure Commission. There is no cost savings included in the consultation document. The legislation yet to be enacted, amongst other requirements, requires water services to be delivered at the least cost to consumers and businesses. Ratepayers wish to know what they will pay. There's nothing in that document to suggest the cross-section of options under each option. We know what you pay under your capital value rating system option, but you haven't shown what ratepayers would pay under a CCO. Why is that not shown in the document? There is no outline for the option. Apparently 70% of ratepayers in Kapiti had a reduction in water charges when meters were introduced. Uniform charges are also an option which I've raised before. The two waters option is supported. This will bring commercial discipline and focus on infrastructure management. This option will be more open to introducing citywide water metering and introduce water charging on a fairer basis than the current capital value rating. Orion, Littleton Port Company and the airport are presumably doing a good job of running strategic infrastructure on behalf of the city. Why not water and waste? Land drainage should remain in-house as there are waterways which cross local and regional council boundaries. There are also linkages with other services, especially green spaces. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Pauline, please.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. At the beginning, you said something like 72% of New Zealanders support volumetric charging. Is that what you said?
That's the New Zealand Infrastructure Commission's analysis based on the survey they did.
Right, and so that's just directly for water use, not just excess water?
No.
Right.
No.
And I think the reason that we haven't been able to put charges in for a CCO is that would not be established yet. I mean, depends how much debt they take on, and they can take on a lot more than we can. So I don't think we can have that level of detail yet, do we? No.
Is that a question or a statement?
I was answering yours. Sorry, I was answering yours. You put it as a question. Why haven't we included costings in the CCO model?
So, Kevin, in question, in Auckland, I know, or Nelson, here we go, it's right from the first drop, isn't it? If you turn the first drop you use, you start paying.
Yes.
Whereas here we're different because we haven't yet got meters on everything. We're not far off it. It's got a long way to go, especially when we've got shared driveways with 2 or 3 houses up there with only 1 meter at the front, which is a bit of a mish. And we'll have to.
I understand that.
But we've got to get on top of it sooner or later. So I think we're quietly working towards that.
You haven't said that. You haven't said that in the document.
All right. Yep. So I find that the place that we sometimes stay at in Motueka from the first drop, if you've got a leaky tap, you fix it damn quick, because you haven't got the luxury of 700 or 900 litres freeboard up your sleeve, because as I say you pay from first little drip. So that's what we could be heading towards in the long run, I feel, because the rest of the country's doing it. We will do one day have it.
the sooner the better.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? Oh, no, we're all good. Thank you very much for coming in, mate. Okay, we have Malcolm, is it? No.
Jeff Barnes is here.
Jeff. Yeah, thank you.
Used to work here.
Oh, there. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
How you doing?
Councillors. I generally support the current charging regime. My memory, I worked for the City Council in the days when the Drainage Board was destructed and merged into the whole citywide City Council. Effectively a corporate structure taking two waters, it would be, or three waters, would be just adding water supply back to the functions of the Drainage Board. Now, for those of you who can remember it, managing those utilities under local government structure, but with a high focus on utility management, does deny many of the attributes of parks and ecological values for stormwater. So you need to be very careful about what is the brief for the CCO in managing stormwater. My primary concern is that a shift to a corporate structure with volumetric charging as the basis and a high focus on profitability, as companies are charged to do, will mean that problems which inevitably arise will be hidden from the consumers. They may well be known to governments, but they will be hidden from the consumers until things become chaotic. Wellington is a classic case. Auckland does have elements of that. Thames Valley Water, a classic case of hiding the problems. So they had illegal discharges into riverways, they had water supply blowouts, and they were still paying huge bonuses to the managers. It's an absolute chaotic state. Okay, that's privatised. They went from corporatised to privatisation, but the motivations are there. So be very careful what you wish for, because you could well get it and it becomes irreversible. Now, the report doesn't go into the practical issues, and I think that is the fundamental. Whatever you choose ought to be better than the current delivery option for service to the consumers. For instance, do you know now what is going out the ocean out for? What the quality of that? I guess only the fish know. But who's going to manage it when it's in a corporate structure? What are your KPIs? What are your performance standards that you're going to set for this company, and publish them, and publish the reports regularly to the community, not just to the council, but in a form the community can observe how asset management and how service delivery is proceeding according to quality standards. Because many of these things, once one of these practices put in place, take a long time to reverse, and the consumer will always pay. The governance and management costs of a company will be higher than a council-operated scheme. The history of the Drainage Board showed it was a low-cost operation in a very shallow management structure. The old MED was a very shallow management structure. The general manager knew the foreman. I was here at the council. Ivan Crosby was managing water supply. He visited all the wellheads when they were commissioned. He visited the major blowouts, and it was there were only two layers between him and the blue-collar workers, and they had their team working from the Colombo Street yard. Management were in touch with what was going on in the field, and the communication to the elected members was very high. Can you guarantee that under any proposed change? It is the practical issues of service delivery, namely water supply. How are you going to extend the 70 million cubic metres consent limit? We're coming up to that, 60 odd million being pumped, 60 million being pumped, but 50 million going through the meters. The biggest waster of water is the council's own network. Now, you know that, but the KPIs need to register that, and it's not going to get any change. It's not going to change under a company structure initially. Where does the report address how a corporate structure will address that supply issues? Our sewage treatment plant needs constant work. There have been recent problems. The ocean artform masks, I get a whole lot of problems. Doesn't actually display it to the community. When it was being pumped into the estuary, you knew exactly what it was. Right now, you don't. You assume things are going well until there's a major blowout. I've detailed what I consider to be some of the practical issues in my submission. Under the water supply volumetric, and I assume you would be going volumetric for sewage, that water in equals water out. Is that a fair and reasonable charging basis? Are you going to have a fixed and variable charge, or fixed and floating charge? On what basis is that charge going to be? These practical issues need to be resolved before a decision is taken. You need to take a view. I believe you need to take a view on it. The company may take a different view once formed, but at least have a view and communicate that view to the community to get reasonable feedback from them. The billing system has some real headaches in it. It's expensive to run, it is problematic. You no doubt have had a lot of complaints from your constituents over unreasonable bills, the unexpected bills. But when you get into a full cost recovery regime by volumetric, those issues will magnify. For instance, can you use the ratepayer database as your billing base for a company? What does the Privacy Act say about that? Is it possible? It is. Well, it's the whole basis, because can you say to a company, right, here, go ahead and do the job. Now, find out who lives at number 24, then number 25. Are they tenants? Are they landlords? Around the electricity system, that's been doing it for 100 years. In fact, the council sold the billing system to Meridian, I think, for 350 million back in the early 90s. A nice little earner. But that took a lot of time to accumulate and gather, and it was very valuable. But you must make sure you can set up a company and have it with a working database. And when you go on to charging in arrears, in that year of transfer, are you going to give the consumers effectively a holiday, a cash flow holiday for a year? Or are you going to double charge them? You're going to charge them rates and water bills in the same year. You must, because you need to provide working capital to this company. All of that working capital adds to it. Form a company, and the first thing it's going to do is, well, we've got all these assets, let's borrow against them. Mm-hmm. The ratepayers will be carrying that debt. It will add to the 3 billion plus. It is in the nature of corporates with asset bases to borrow. They can't resist it, and they'll be promised it's easy to borrow and you get a good credit rating, blah, blah, blah. But it is the ratepayer and the ratepayer capacity which gives us a Standard & Poor's credit rating. And to be frank, we're tired of doing it. It's too much of a burden to put on our shoulders. Manage the asset well, manage it and communicate the way you're managing that asset before you make decisions on corporate structure. Because frankly, that's probably the easy bit. It's the hard bit of asset management.
How are you getting on there, mate? Are you nearly there?
Nearly there. Consumers should not be charged a return on capital. It is the consumers, the citizens of the ratepayers of Christchurch, who have bought and paid for the asset base. They paid for it under when they bought their sections and development contributions. They put that part of the reticulation cost within on their property, servicing the property was paid for as part of the purchase price. Are you going to set up a company who's going to charge them again a return on that capital? That seems a bit double counting and a bit harsh. So if you're just looking at operating cost recovery, that's fine, but you can guarantee a company will be thinking, we own the asset, we're going to charge for return on capital of that asset. But it's our asset, just as the roads are the community's assets, maybe in the name of the council, but they were bought and paid for by the citizens of Christchurch. Development contributions. You collect development contributions from subdividers for part water, sewage, land drainage. How are they going to be dealt with? Are you going to pass those to the company, or are you going to retain them? But then how can you justify charging subdividers development contributions and yet not have that money applied to the capital costs? I don't see that was in the report. So there's so many practical issues that need to be detailed and disclosed.
That's great, Jeff. It's well run out of time.
Thank you.
But it is very good to have someone the same age as, I won't say the same age as me, that actually knows what the Drainage Board was.
Yes.
Because I did a lot of work for them. It was great. They're a great outfit. Really knew their stuff.
Yes.
So thank you very much for coming in and alerting us to a few issues.
And also that Jeff was one of the rating experts in New Zealand. So he was an accountant here in the 80s and 90s, and when we were doing the Rating Act review and I was in DIA, he was the man.
The man.
Department.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I wrote a fair bit of the policy, which
Yeah.
is tucked in the annual plan.
Good idea, mate. Well done.
Thank you.
Okay.
And good luck with the issues.
So I'll go to Malcolm
and Quentin.
And Quentin, please. Gentlemen, good
Kia ora.
afternoon.
Thank you for hearing us today. The Apawaho Heathcote River Network is a community voice for the river. I think you know us. So, as such, we're coming to present from a community point of view. And just to get straight to the chase, we would greatly prefer an in-house model. And we'll explain, what our thinking is in this presentation. We're particularly concerned about stormwater. I mean, stormwater is everywhere. It's especially true in the Papaho catchment, but really for all of Christchurch. And we would really like to see the continuation of what we've seen has been a very positive approach to stormwater that's integrated in and incorporating the 6 values that have been long part of best practice within Christchurch City Council. So.
And if local is going to mean something, then in local water done well, then it just can't be a political statement. It's got to be something where local voices have a direct influence on the decision making, and the actual voice of the local people is heard. A CCO, we believe, is a whole step removed from the community.
We're particularly concerned that mana whenua and treaty rights are retained, that the good relationship with Ngāi Tahu and the hapu in this area are maintained and strengthened, and we feel that the City Council's already set some precedent with that, and we'd be concerned that any changes that took water assets outside of direct council control would weaken that.
We think that the whole relationship business that is local government is really important. The community, its organisations, the decision makers, and staff, of course, that whole integrated whole is part of this, is the reason for a successful local government. And that's another reason why in-house works, we feel, much better than a CCO.
Obviously, we're particularly concerned about the condition of the Papaho. It is a river that's under pressure, and we believe that we've had some really productive discussions with the council that we fear would not be as productive if we were discussing with a council-controlled organisation. So we really want to look at and think about the challenge that we would put forward is, which model of water service delivery is going to incentivise continuing improvements, because we certainly, on the ground, we see that improvements are still needed, and we believe that, the council's best placed to achieve those.
Christchurch is on the leading edge of certainly stormwater provision, and the city chose those 6 values approach. It was leading edge at the time, and it still is. And the in-house model is the way to keep those 6 values going forward. So pressure from the community, if you look at the wastewater environmental performance standards that are coming down the track, the only way that we can see that the standards can be maintained, that the current standards that we have can be maintained, is through some sort of nuanced local political pressure. And that means that the in-house model is probably the way to go. The CCO is that whole step again removed from the community's influence.
Primarily for us, it's all about the environment, and we really want to continue to see environmental considerations given a high profile within our water delivery and stormwater systems. We think the in-house model is definitely going to be most responsive for our concerns.
So just to wrap it up, that's why we would prefer an in-house method.
Good. Tyler, all done? You happy?
Yes.
Yep. Tyler, please.
Kia ora. Thank you so much for coming in. Good to see us again. I just want to play devil's advocate for a little bit here, and I think everyone sort of knows which way I'm sort of leaning towards. But going off the history of what our council's done, achieved, and sometimes not achieved, do you see any benefits from going into a 2-water CCO at all?
What do you say? Well, it would be better than a 3-water CCO. But all the issues that we associate with a CCO compared to an in-house would still be there. Particularly about the integration, the ability to integrate everything that's happening, because it is such a complex thing. The environment is complex. Our interaction with it has to be subtle. The 2-water method is not as good as the in-house. That would be our.
In your line of work, you actually sort of go across all three waters most respectively. But
well, I mean, stormwater is our main concern. Sewage also, because of our overflows.
Yeah.
And so we'd be concerned that getting on top of we're now seeing water pollution signs, permanent ones going up along the Pawaho. We understand the rationale for that, but we'd like to get to a point where that's not possible, and so that really involves work on the sewage system as part of it. So we're less convinced that a CCO would be incentivised to have those aspirational goals, which is really what it's all about.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tyler, and thank you, Quentin and Malcolm. Thanks for coming up. Okay, Grant, there not yet. Okay. Have we got a Steve? No, we haven't got a Steve. We haven't got a Terry, because I know who he looks like. So we've got ahead of ourselves yet again. So talk amongst yourself for 5 minutes. So welcome back, everyone. We only have 3 to go, and only 2 are here, but that doesn't matter. We'll get cracking. Is Grant here, please?
Yep.
Afternoon all.
Greetings.
Right, so I've read the business case and the consultation document and viewed the recordings of the 2 council sessions that discuss the business case. I do not agree with the recommendations that the in-house delivery model is the best solution and believe that a water service, the CCO, whether 2 waters or 3 waters, would provide a better solution for the customers of Christchurch City Council. To me, one of the key failings is that the business case primarily focuses on 2 points, which is governance and finance, without looking at the benefits within a business model that focuses on making improvements, efficiencies and savings for providing the 3 water services to ratepayers, something likely to be required by the Commerce Commission in the near future. Through the LTP process, Council develops asset management plans, and each AMP has an improvement item section. The last 2 AMP cycles have not provided any additional OPEX to the 3 waters business to meet the improvements items requested, things like asset assessments, operational improvements and smarter processes. These improvements are essential if Council wants to provide a better water service to our customers. There is nothing in the business unit that indicates any business improvements have been considered. The financial modelling states that all 3 business units will essentially meet the requirements of financial stability within the 10-year forecast period asked by the DIA. The difference is therefore raised in the initial setup costs, which is stated to favour the current model because the systems are already in place. However, it does not state what, if any, allowances have been made for the costs of the service level agreements required as part of the financial separation, and there'll be a lot of them. Conversely, it also does not state whether the benefits of leveraging the massive investment by the Labour government into setting up the water services entities were looked into to reduce the setup costs of a CCO, only commenting on the cost of setting up a board. The processes previously developed would provide a big leap forward for 3 waters asset management maturity and an ability to make rapid digital advances. If we don't take the opportunity to look into what can be leveraged from the work done under the water reform process, even for an in-house model, it would be a substantial oversight. During the presentation of the business case to Council, there were comments made against setting up a CCO for fear of turning into Wellington Water, which nobody wants. This is a flawed comparison as Wellington Water is a non-asset owning entity, so they have no mechanism for raising their own funding, therefore needing the Wellington councils to provide the CAPEX and OPEX requested. And if the funding is not approved, as has been the case, Wellington Water then must manage the required workload with funding shortfalls along with the associated residual risks and the resulting reputational damage. With an in-house business unit, my concern is how will Christchurch City Council avoid this from occurring if the 3 waters unit asks for funding envelopes that conflicts with the contentious political issue of rates increases. The business case states that the governance structure that currently exists is the best way to manage 3 waters. I do not agree with this, and hopefully it's not career limiting. My reasons are 3-year political cycles may lead to a lack of long-term consistency with direction of the 3 waters business. Political influence can distort prioritisation and funding decisions. Council reluctance to agree to additional OPEX for improvements due to the increase in rates. Councillors are not legally or financially accountable for decisions, unlike a CCO board. Councillors may not have the technical expertise needed to oversee a multifaceted business like 3 waters as compared to a dedicated CCO board. The current model also allows for political decisions to alter funding requests. For example, during the last LTP, 3 waters capital budget was reduced between successive presentations to Council to meet caps. But then after this, councillors requested specific funding to be added. For example, modelled flood risk program funding of $180 million over 10 years and $30 million added for water main renewals for leakage mitigation, despite a proportion of leakage, roughly 35%, actually occurs at private properties. In contrast, the CCO would need a solid business case to approve spending, as it would be open to external audits, with the liability of action sitting with staff and ultimately to the board. My last point relates to the references in the business case that a water services CCO would not align with council's strategic priorities, even though these priorities can change every 3 years with a new council. While applicable to guide the wider council businesses, I don't believe that strategic priorities are necessary for a Three Waters unit where the priority must be public health. That is, provision of clean, safe drinking water, safe collection and treatment of wastewater, mitigation of the effects of urban development on our waterways, and mitigation of the effects of urban development on secondary flow paths. Other key priorities would include planning for adaptation of the effects of climate change and related infrastructure resilience. In short, I believe that the Three Waters business unit would be best run as a dedicated CCO. However, in whatever form it does take, I hope that it focuses on improving from its current ways of doing things to invest in its people and processes and leveraging the work undertaken by the previous government.
Good, thank you. Yeah, well done, mate. Matt, got a few questions. Melanie?
Thanks, Grant. Did you ever, you've mentioned Three Waters, although your big paragraph at the start talks 2 or 3. Did you have a preference there?
I guess Two Waters would be a lot simpler. Three Waters, as many people have commented on, has got so many ties back with other relevant parts within council, whether it's parks, whether it's a lot of your planning functions. So Two Waters would definitely be easier, and it's the same way that Scottish Water went. I guess that's for you guys to decide.
Thank you. Tyler?
Kia ora, Grant. Thanks for coming in. Hey, I just have a question around, let's focus on the protection of the environment and the environmental outcomes that we're trying to look for. With any change of government, as we're seeing right now, that those could potentially be at risk, depending on what policies are at hand. And I guess the council layer is the one that sort of helps bolster that with whatever government comes in. Do you have a view on holding those CCOs to the same priorities that we have at council in comparison to what regulation is brought forward by central government?
Well, I guess the CCO would be, a lot of that would be dictated by whatever the Government and Commerce Commission require. So Te Mara Arawai are the ones that are going to be the driving force, I believe, for a lot of what the CCOs or the local water done well units will end up doing. It's already put forward its water requirements, wastewater coming off the back of that, and they've already indicated that they'll be looking at stormwater as well.
Cool. I'm going to squeeze one in there if it was not locking. You brought up some really, really good points in your submission, and thank you for clarifying that Wellington water part. The next question is around the governance, and just in your view, and you may or may not be able to comment on this, but do you think that we could be doing better than what we're delivering at the moment, operational wise? If not, do you think governance could be actually resourcing a bit more into operations to be able to deliver that?
Do you mean as a ratepayer?
Yes.
My comment
yes, as a ratepayer. As a ratepayer. Please feel comfortable.
I'm sure there's always improvements that could be made, but you'd need to discuss that probably with the relevant staff members to get an appreciation for that.
Yep, that's awesome. Thank you.
Samuel?
Hey, yeah, thank you for your presentation, or your submission. I just had one question, which was around your comments around the governance structure. So I think you said something, which is, it's all good, fair enough, around the technical ability of people governing an organisation. Just so I'm clear in my mind, with a CCO, is it your intent, would your preference be that you just have engineers governing that?
No, hell no.
No.
No,
Yeah.
no, definitely not. I mean, you need a suite of people, and like a number of you guys are business minded, and that's what's needed as well. There needs to be a business focus. You need to still consider environment, but you need engineers in there as well to fully understand what's going on. You can't just rely. I mean, I'm assuming as a ratepayer, for you guys, you're relying a lot on what staff are providing you with. But in a CCO where you're a dedicated unit, then I would have expected that members of the board would also be professionals in an engineering field, at least some of them.
Right, okay.
Probably not enough set up so it would sway a vote type thing, but
Yeah.
you'd
No,
need to
I was
have
just
that
trying to
in
understand that difference, because we've seen it in the past, and I think it's one of the reasons we consulted on keeping it in-house was that sometimes when you remove things too far from the shareholder, that things go sort of horribly wrong, and it's just so in many respects the diversity around a table, regardless of whether it's a council or a board, diversity of thought, kind of helps improve the decision making. And I was just trying to pick up on your comments in terms of whether we just want technical people or not. Yeah.
No, definitely not.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Cheers.
And lastly, Pauline.
Yeah, thank you, Grant. Because the thing is that an in-house model would end up being with a dedicated unit anyway, ring-fenced. So, and that would consist of all the expertise that you're speaking of there. And when you talk about, political interference, but there's also political access, if you like, with that model, that the ratepayer can actually speak to us about what they have concerns. And do you have any concern that perhaps it would be more difficult with a CCO, basically a private board?
Possibly, and I guess the CCO would be kind of driven to deliver certain things. But I guess there would still need to be a mechanism where ratepayers, whether they come to council to make, inquiries or submissions, and then council takes it to the CCO, there would need to be quite a good relationship between organisations to make sure these things flow properly.
Yeah, and it's true. And the other thing is with, you're concerned with, if it stayed in-house, the council's ability to actually deliver it to the standard required. But we've got Taumata Arawai and the Commerce Commission, and the government's charging us a couple of million a year to pay for the levy to make sure that the oversight is there. Does that not give you comfort with an in-house model that we would have to deliver it?
If you're looking at compliance, we're doing really well because we are driven by compliance, and a lot of our funding goes in towards compliance because no one wants to be prosecuted. It's all the other things that sit behind that would drive business improvements. As a ratepayer, I'm assuming aren't being done. So those are the improvements that I was referring to.
In order to get to the compliance, yeah.
It's not even compliance. It's business. How you run your business, make improvements. How you make operational improvements. How you use money wiser, so you can make clear and transparent decision making. So that when asset management plans and activity plans come to you guys each time, that you can actually understand where the numbers are coming from. It's not just a pie chart on a page, and you don't know what's actually come through, and how can you trust the data? So it's understanding where all the information comes from, and the staff members for being able to leverage operational data. And as a ratepayer, I'm assuming this is what happens. Getting the operational information so you can make smarter decisions on your asset lives, to extend these kind of things, to make better use of the actual funding that's provided. And I would assume that's what the Commerce Commission are going to be looking for, that you're doing these smart things to make better use, so your rates increases don't just keep going up.
Thank you. Good answer.
Yeah, we've really run out of time. What do you got here, Yanni? A biggie or a little one?
I mean, it's kind of a little one. I just wondered, like, if you read the asset management maturity assessment around Three Waters, there's a number of things in there that raise flags about how we're doing things. I'm just trying to understand whether, instead of looking at the structure, you think there's other places that we could look, like the asset management maturity assessment, in terms of making those improvements in the short term?
Councillor, there's a report coming back in April from the asset management team on the asset management maturity assessment and progress with that, if that would help.
Yep, that'll sort that. Okay.
Yeah, Dave Griffiths' team bring it back.
Yep. Thank you, Brent. Thank you, Grant. Very good.
Thanks,
buddy. Okay, young Terence. You may well be the last candidate of the day. Anytime you're ready, man.
All right. His Worship the Mayor, elected members, councillors, elected councillors, the Chief Executive, Principal Advisor and Council staff. My submission today is that water should stay in elected members' hands. The voting public of Christchurch have loaned you their sovereignty over your areas of responsibility in water supply. They have loaned you their sovereignty to make decisions on their behalf, but voters haven't abdicated their sovereignty. Because if you make a decision they don't like, the voters will remove you by voting for someone that represents their values. This is our local democracy system at work. We don't want government bureaucrats that we can't see or even don't know who they are, whom are based in Wellington, making the decisions for our water. You, as elected representatives, are best poised to represent your areas of interest because you are the people on the ground and the people out there for your community to talk to about these issues. At least you should be out there talking to your communities. So, elected representatives, what are you going to do with this loan sovereignty from your communities? Are you going to push the decisions back up to Wellington and let them remain in your bailiwick? Let the decisions remain in your local area by the people and for the people which you represent. I urge you to use your loan sovereignty to vote for clean water. Use your loan sovereignty to vote to get our water systems running like they did in the 90s. Christchurch was renowned for our water quality. Now just about every house has at least one water filter jug or a filtration system on their house. That's not right. We need to push for clean water, fresh, and that's your job as council to advocate for that. It's your job because you're elected to represent your communities. It's your job to use your loan sovereignty from your communities to do the best for them. It's your job as councillors to consider your constituents' views, and be the face of those decisions. Councillors' job is to inspire, to lead, to govern, and to operate at peak efficiency and effectiveness. And most of all, to lead with common sense. So I urge you to vote to have water in council's control. Thank you, and I'd like to leave the remaining of my time for questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Oh, sorry, Terry, we're all questioned out. Cool. So thank you very much for coming in. Sorry we kept you waiting a wee while. All done, so we have... They're on their way, are they?
Potentially, but we are not sure.
Don't give me this brush.
We've tried finding him, but he hasn't answered, so hopefully that means he's...
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll talk amongst ourselves for 3 minutes, please. Kelly. Okay, yeah, all right. Hey, tuki, hi, kia tuki, hi, hooray, hooray, ta, he, hey. Thank you very much.